I know I talk all the time. I'm very talkative.
She looks metallic. Metallic.
Though I can't quite recall overnight sensation.
Welcome to The Chop, and in this episode we go down a deep rabbit hole. This is not going to be easy. We have a lot of ground to cover, but by the end of it, I hope that you will understand exactly the finesse of the work that was employed to effectively convey the idea that Gensport is a disingenuous and calculating person. The villain edit of Gensport is a marvel of story producing, and this episode was put together with such a degree of precision and calculation that it makes it almost admirable. From editing to music, confessionals, cryptiques, even some of the queens themselves, everything works in unison to carry on a very convincing narrative. And it worked. But they have been sloppy. They left too many clues behind. This is going to be one of the most intensive reviews that I have ever made, and it did require help from our viewers and all of our time and ingenuity to pull down the curtain on one of the best villain edits that was ever executed on RuPaul's Drag Race. This rabbit hole is deep, and getting to the other side, it's not going to be easy. We don't have all the pieces of the puzzles yet. We might be making some minor mistakes, but if that happens, I'll be sure to let you know in the future episodes. And everything that is presented in this video is to be intended as speculation. Now, a note for the new viewers of the channel. I know what you might be thinking, but I can assure you that I showed the same exact level of energy for Brita and Guido back in Season 12, for Alexis Mateo in All Stars 5, and for Candy Muse and Utica in Season 13. It's not about the queen, it's about the edit. Now, let's begin with the review. In order to understand what's going to happen, it's inevitable, we will have to establish some foundations. Number one, on All Stars, each episode looks like it took 2 days to film, so we'll be calling those days day 1 and day 2. Confessionals are usually filmed after each day, so on average we have 2 sets of confessionals for every episode, 1 for each day of filming. Sometimes production might run out of time and they don't actually have time to film the confessional for the day. So what usually can happen is that confessional is filmed the day after, either in the morning, or it's merged with the confessional for the subsequent episode in day 1. So they sit there and they talk about 2 different days of filming. We are going to be calling these confessionals the skipped confessionals. Number 3, some queens might be asked to refilm confessional a long time after filming for the season actually wrapped up. Never forget Kamora Hall and how she sported new regrown eyebrows literally split seconds after seeing her in the workroom with shaved eyebrows. This literally had to be refilmed months later. And of course, our spiky hair rosé from season 13, that confessional that strangely appeared in basically all of the episodes of the seasons, pushing narratives, pushing storylines, and confirming things that will be convenient to the plot. So, remember all of these things. Now, with this said, I need to prime you for a little moment on some confessional that we are going to be seeing during this episode. You need to know that they exist before we start discussing the episode. If you forget a little bit of them, it's not a problem. Just know that they exist. The first set of confessional comes from Gensport. This is Pimple on the Lip Jen. Now, Pimple on the Lip Jen appears in episode 4. It references directly the events of episode 4, and this is most likely a skipped confessionals because, as you can see, those exact set of pimples appear during filming for episode 5, day 1.
I can portray Lady Gaga like nobody's business. We have a very similar background. Catholic school, Italian family, singer who does musical theater, and that is very, very who I am.
Number 2 confessional from Jen is Pimple on the Nose Jen. This confessional appears in episode 4 with no direct references to episode 4, also appears in episode 5 with loose references to episode 5, and it looks like it begins to a future episode.
I am not only looking at who I want to stay in the competition, but also who I think the other girls are going to vote for. Because now is not the time to be the outlier. I'm going against my heart, but my head is telling me that this will be the best decision for me to make for the long haul in this competition.
So when I spoke to Scarlet, she said she had the best critiques and you had the harshest.
Oh, bitch. This is truly some bullshit.
Number 3 is Big Pimple on the Lip Jen with Razor Burn on the Neck. It's very unclear to me where this confessional comes from. Believe me, I put all my best effort to find out, but I don't have a definitive answer yet. This is the confessional in which Jen is crying. My best bet is that this confessional comes from episode 4, day 1, and she is crying because she's referencing the Cryptiques from episode 3, the one in which Rue told her that she lacks funk and that she lacks humanity.
But you know that I can't be Gaga unless I'm bringing something nuts to that performance. I'm a big cheerleader at heart. And so for people to say that it's insincere and it's not real is crushing to me, because that is me.
Now, the second set of confessionals that we're going to look at are from Eureka. The first one, what I like to call Punk Rock Hair Eureka. Now, Punk Rock Hair Eureka appears first in episode 4 and directly references the events of episode 4. Also appears in episode 5 with no direct reference from episode 5. This to me appears to be a skipped confessional.
I did not want to see my big sister go. And girl, now there's only 2 big girls left. My God, we better slow down, bitch. We ain't got the big girls on the season.
I just don't.
Jen is wearing me the fuck out.
And the last one is Pimple on the Cheek Eureka. Now, Pimple on the Cheek Eureka first appears in this episode, episode 5, but it makes no direct references to this episode. However, Eureka only appears with that specific pimple in episode 4, day 1, in the workroom. So this confessional very likely comes from episode 4, day 1. Now that we have established the background, if you don't remember all of this information, don't worry, it's not a problem. The important thing is that you know that those confessionals exist. I'll be catching you up later on. So, the episode begins, and the first thing that we see is previously on All Stars, and we are already primed for Jen's narrative. We have a throwbacks from episode 4 that it's telling us that Jen is fake and she is a calculating person.
I am not only looking at who I want to stay in the competition, but also who I think the other girls are going to vote for. My head is telling me that this will be the best decision for me to make for the long haul in this competition.
Jen is a calculating person and she is fake. However, this is a false narrative because Pimple on the Nose Jen comes from the future. A future in which, in all likelihood, someone is accusing her of throwing Scarlet under the bus. After this, previously, we are back in the workroom. What we are seeing right here is episode 4, day 2 of filming. Don't forget that. So we're back in the workroom and we find out that Jara has been sent home, where she spilled some tea about Jessica being scheduled for another lip sync during a Roscoe's viewing party. You will find the link in the description. So we are here and we are counting lipsticks, and the first thing that happens is that we are met with a mismatched confessional from Jen. On the left, we have Red Pimple on the Lip Jen, a skipped confessional, telling us that the group voted unanimously to save Akira, and this is a complete 180 from what she thought was going to happen. So, And then Pimple on the Nose Jen comes to tell us that she is in panic mode. Now, this is again another false narrative. The narrative is telling us, ooh, Jen was caught red-handed. She tried to do something shady, but she was caught, and she's admitting it on screen. However, Pimple on the Nose Jen doesn't belong here. She comes from somewhere else, her words taken out of context in service of the narrative.
The group voted unanimously to save Akira. This is just a complete 180 from what I thought was going to happen. So I am in panic mode.
Immediately after, Jen is trying to explain herself. However, cue the background music telling us that whatever she's saying is bullshit. Cue all of the queens bitch-facing to her.
I am in panic mode. It was such a difficult decision. So I chose you, Akira.
Okay. Got it.
So, while Jen is trying to explain herself, with the background music on, with the queens bitch-facing, immediately we have Akira teleporting from filming of episode 5, day 1, to look pissed at Jen. At this point, Jen tries to explain herself a second time. Cue the tense music, cue the shady noises to take away any credibility from what she's saying, and she says that she didn't want to vote for Akira, but the consensus of the group was voting based on track record. She didn't want to think that she was being shady if she voted for Jara.
My heart said that I wanted you to stay, but I thought track record integrity. That's what we were going on.
And the queens tell her, it's your decision, you can do whatever you want. Cue a confessional from Akira, this one belonging to this episode, saying out of camera, however, that at the end of the day, it's your own decision. So, you gotta grow up, mama, and put your big panties on. What was she talking about? Was she talking about the fact that she was in the bottom the previous episode? Or is she talking about Jen? We don't know, but in this context, she is talking about Jen. The girl continued discussing about the track record. Should it be considered in voting? Trinity said no. Scarlet and Eureka says yes. Jen is confused. And at this point, we have another confessional from Jen. This time is red pimple on the lip Jen, a skipped confessional, telling us on camera that she looks like a traitor. And off camera, in a Franken sentence, she says, I miscalculated this week. And that sentence was patched together.
I think I was trying too hard to be on the same page as everybody else, and now I look like the traitor. I miscalculated this week. I miscalculated this week. I miscalculated this week.
Everything is telling you that Jen is basically full of shit. You might ask, where is Jen coming from when she said, I miscalculated? What does she mean by that? Suffice it to say that in this context, having her admitting to have miscalculated gives credibility to the storyline that she tried to throw Akira under the bus, that it didn't work, and that she was caught red-handed. Now, the question that I have for you is, do you really believe it? Because when you think about it and you take into account the performance on the show, the following on social media, the reach that these queens have, the reputations that these queens have, who is a bigger threat to you, Akira or Jara? Seriously. If I wanted to backstab someone in her place, I would have kicked Jara out, just like everybody did. Find the right excuse, kick the competition out, and if you can pinpoint any other kind of doubts on somebody else, well, guess what? You are winning the RuPaul's Drag Race narrative jackpot. After watching this section, I am left with the feeling that Jen might be a very insecure person, the kind of person that prefers to hide behind the character and establish conventions like track record, for example, rather than make her own decision and own her own decision. And all of that, it's being exploited, effectively exploited, to build a narrative in here. Corinne, Jessica Wilde said on Insta that she was booked for this date and she wasn't scheduled to come at another time. That is interesting. That is interesting. So, what's really happening in here? Is Jara telling the truth, or is Jessica trying to maximize her possibility to be on a future season of All Stars? We will have to see about that, but I think I have evidence that supports Jara's narrative in this point, and we're going to talk about that after the Maxi Challenge. Hi! Last episode I asked the viewers if they could please remember to give a like to the video and leave a comment and possibly even share it, because YouTube is really suggesting our content only to a handful of people. And thanks to your help, the video reached more than 10,000 views, which is almost 3 times what our reviews actually made, and almost 100 people subscribed just because of that video. So if you really appreciate these reviews and what we do here, please remember to give us a like, leave a comment, even to tell me to go fuck myself. Everything goes. The algorithm doesn't care, but as long as you do it, it will really help us to reach a broader audience. Thank you so much. Well, and I do hope that not many people will tell me to go fuck myself, but you never know. I'm ready for anything. Back to the review. It's a new day in the workroom, and we find out that Trinity bleached her hair. So we finally find out where that strange confessional was coming from. Unfortunately, this episode we get to meet red hair Trinity. So we are back at square one. Now, Ru comes in and announces the Maxi Challenge for the episode. It's going to be a talk show called Pink Tabletop. On the bright side, the queens choose their teammates and they can assign the topics by themselves, but the topics are chosen by the producers, which I'm sure has nothing to do with the background check or medical records of these queens. It's just, hot button topics like motherhood, sex, or body issues. And I'm like, yes, these are important topics, but they're not really hot button topics. Like, for example, my personal suggestions would have been: number 1, woke politics and face value, how pretending undermines our quest for equality, or too soon or too late, the dilemma of medical intervention for transgender youth. And number 3, a quest for family, adoption and surrogacy in the LGBTQI+ community. What about those hot button topics? But, it's Drag Race, it's what it is. Now, what is this talk show? This is not some trashy things where people snatch their wigs and throw some shoes and then the audience gasps because somebody was invited without the guests not actually knowing that they would come. This is not trashy, okay? I didn't know what this was supposed to look like. I didn't understand anything in the beginning, so thanks to Fantasia that actually clarified it for me. So if you're not from the US, the reference here is to a talk show from Jada Pinkett Smith, the wife of Will Smith, called Red Table Talk. This is a serious talk show. So we are fishing for emotions, we are fishing for drama, we are fishing for vulnerabilities, so the queens better hair it all at the snap of the fingers and in front of the camera, all while looking comfortable and fabulous, because the audience here is hungry for emotional trauma served on a platter. Or at least in the eyes of the producers. My opinion, of course. The queens are not supposed to camping it up too much or play a character. This is a talk show where they have to pretend to be themselves. They have to look comfortable, they have to have a good chemistry, and they have to keep the conversation rolling smoothly. From my point of view, I'm all in for listening, understanding, supporting, learning, but this is just emotional porn, and this is uncomfortable to me, and it's uncomfortable that they did this to begin with, because some of these queens might not even be ready to talk and hear all this emotional turmoil that's inside them, like Raja, for example. And some of you might come and say, well, yes, but they have a choice, they can avoid doing it. And I'm like, of course, yes, they have a choice, but that choice is highly discouraged because they invested money to come on All Stars, their image is on the line, their ability to pay rent is on the line, their career is on the line, so of course, yes, they can walk off. And then 6 months later, I'm sure that they will get a nice relatable edit, right? Not everyone in here is Adore Delano. What Adore Delano did, she could do because she is Adore Delano. I respect all of their stories, but I'm not going to review this challenge. Now, the groups are as follows. Ginger, Pandora, and Jen will discuss body issues. Raja, Kylie, and Scarlet will discuss motherhood, with Raja admitting to feeling uncomfortable in doing it, saying that her talk is probably going to be very heartfelt and emotional, and Kylie responds, "We need that." All of the queens are aware that they are fishing for drama, and that's what they have to do, because they are professionals. The problem is, sometimes you can try to be as professional as you want, but something's just too much. You can do it, but you're going to pay the emotional consequences of doing it. And the last group is Akira, Trinity, and Eureka, and they will be talking about sex. Now, it's a new day in the workroom. The queens filmed the challenges, and we are back in the workroom. This time with Raja. And Raja breaks down in tears because she said too much. She thinks that maybe she said things that will be damaging to her relationship with her mother. She's afraid that her mother won't understand. This moment to me was really heartbreaking because I completely understand how the way that you feel will inevitably clash with the work that you have to do in order to pursue your goal, which is getting a career, getting a redemption from this season, getting the most out of it, and getting to show who you are and earn a living doing what you do. But at some point, the check comes to you, and I don't like that she was put into this situation. I like if queens want to open up. I think that some topics definitely need to be discussed. We definitely need to have those topics in front view in basically the most successful and iconic queer show that we have on television right now, but there must be a better way than this. This was a little bit too much for me. After this, we move to the runway. Now, we are on the main stage. I'm not going to review the looks because I actually ran out of time, but I'm going to talk about the judging for a moment because the judging was really a hot choice. Somehow, Ginger is a winner, but one group is judged as a group. All the other queens are judged as individuals, and this is a very strange choice. Why did they make this choice? It makes no sense. Why didn't they judge everyone as individuals? So what I think happened in here is that, number one, they wanted Ginger to have a win. I think we can all agree on that. But then, why save one group while judging everybody individually? Who was in that group? Well, it was Akira, Trinity, and Eureka. And while Eureka and Trinity did very well in the challenge and on the runway, Akira didn't really do that good, did she? She didn't look very natural to me. She didn't look very spontaneous. She looked like she was playing a character. And that runway, in my opinion, was no clash of the pattern. So why are they saving Akira? Well, what I think happened is that Akira was probably supposed to go home the last episodes. Too bad that the queens had other plans in mind, things went another way, and instead of Akira, Jara went home. What I think happened is that they already have an elimination order, and Jara was simply not scheduled to go home yet. So since Akira stayed, now she has the placement of Jara, and she is probably not scheduled to go home this episode. And this would also justify why Jara went on Roscoe saying, well, Jessica was not scheduled for this lip sync, she was actually scheduled for another. So somehow they wanted to pair, it looks like they wanted to pair Jara from a lip sync from Jessica sending her home. So this is what I think happened in this Cryptiques. If you have another option, let me know, because this is a discussion and I don't have the truth to give to anyone. Just a series of speculations and more or less informed opinions. Let's move on immediately to the Cryptiques. First up is Raja, and to Raja they say that the outfit is interesting, is beautiful, and they love the way the pattern juxtaposes. It's flawless. For the challenge, Michelle says they had the toughest topic because it's a very heated topic. And I'm like, really? Motherhood is a very heated topic? We're not discussing abortion here. This is motherhood. Heated. Well, I don't know. Maybe we have a cultural difference in here. I don't know. So, They tell her that she talked about some great things, like being queer in the South. They praised her for being very factual, and they told her that that's how people listen when you bring facts, which I completely agree. This is exactly the way I'm trying to make my reviews. And it was a strong night for Raja. They loved the fact that she was open, and personally, I believe that Raja was the most genuine out of all of the queens that I've seen this episode. Everybody else was trying to do the best with what they have. Moving on to Kylie. To Kylie, they say that she looked like a butterfly and that she looked fantastic. I don't see very much clash of the patterns in there. She looks stunning as usual. The woman is a sex bomb, that's simply undeniable. You can put her in a pillow and she would still look sexy. But the outfit I don't think was very much on point. For the challenge, Michelle says she did a good job in keeping the conversation moving, but it didn't feel like she got to know Kylie enough. Which is code for, you didn't hear enough trauma. What the fuck are we doing here? You need to hear trauma, Kylie. And she continues, she had a beautiful moment with Raja and she wanted more of that. I would have never known. Because Michelle knows she has more to tell. And I'm like, what exactly are we talking about here, Michelle? Is it something from her medical record? Is it something from her background record? Or is it something that you know personally about her? Maybe she told you in confidence somewhere else and you know. And you're like, Kylie, why didn't you hear that? Kylie, you needed to hear more. Whatever it is, apparently Michelle knows. And then Ross continues, if the point was to be open, well, Kylie didn't open up that much. Yes, Kylie, you should have heard all of your trauma. You don't know how to play the game? Well, Kylie was okay for me. Moving on to Scarlet. They said that she looked absolutely stunning. They ask about the meaning of the letters on her outfit. They say that it's very romantic. To which Rue reacts with one of the fakest, cringiest laughs I have ever seen from RuPaul. For the challenge, Ross says that it's fascinating that she talked about her moms. And the best part was when she was telling her truth. But at times, Scarlet switched into show mode. She should have gone back to being vulnerable, because that is the most interesting part. Being vulnerable is the most interesting part. And I'm like, yes, it is interesting when it's genuine, when it just comes out, when it's part of everything that's going on. Not when you're like, okay, now be vulnerable. Now hear your trauma. I mean, I get it that this is a production, this is a TV show, but for fuck's sake, these are people, they are not objects. They cannot be emotional on cue. If you want that, hire actors. That's as simple as that. However, I have to agree to a certain degree, because if the challenge is to pretend to be spontaneous, you need to remain into your spontaneous character. Not get out of it portraying another character. Do you understand what I mean? I hope you do. At this point, we are intercepted by RuPaul saying that it was interesting watching her going between her drag persona and her real life, and it looks like she hasn't found a sweet spot between the two yet, which is a fair critique. But then she continues that it made her feel uncomfortable. So Snowflake's RuPaul is here to tell her that seeing Scarlet switching between her drag persona and then her vulnerable self made her feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, I guess blackface is totally okay, right? Am I missing something in here? This was filmed before Down Under, so Rue cannot possibly be senile and confusing Scarlet Envy with Scarlet Adams. So at this point, I am thinking, could it be that RuPaul is just an asshole who will say anything for a paycheck? Could it be? Or could it be that maybe his husband is not sharing the money from fracking? This is what keeps me up at night. Diamond drills, high pressure on. That gold show suits you. Bump it for me, yeah. You frack it well. Rigs work non-stop all day long, filling barrels with crude oil. Sell them for me, yeah. You frack it well. This was so uncalled for. I think it was so disrespectful to Scarlet, it was disrespectful to the viewer's intelligence, and it was disrespectful because it trivializes a word that people use to signal to each other that something is going wrong in the conversation and they are hurt on an emotional level. And I wasn't even prepared for what was going to come. Next up we have Jen. And to Jen they say, her face is beautiful, the hair is adorable, the pattern needs to make sense, but hers kind of doesn't look right, and it's probably not clashy enough. And in a way I understand this critique, because it looks like it's one pattern, which is wavy lines, instead of many different patterns which are clearly distinct with each other. So in a way I kind of see the logic behind this critique. I kind of agree with it. Then Ross continues saying that here is the thing with you as a performer. You are so excited to be there. You're always at 110% all of the time. But you are more interesting when you have different paces, different emotions, and different energies. And I'm like, thank you, Ross, for finally telling this person after 2 seasons of filming what the problem really is. The problem here is balance. It's not that, Jen, you are too high. It's not that, Jen, you're too low. The problem is, Jen, you have to find the right balance. But they tell her now, after being told for a whole season that she was too high energy. After, on All Stars Season 6, Episode 3, they told her, your energy is too low now. You need to steal the show. You need to bring the funk and the humanity. Now we are here in Episode 5 saying, oh Jen, not too bad. You are too high energy again. Now, at this point, Jen breaks into crying. She explained that her problem is that she cannot find a balance. And it is frustrating because she doesn't know when to be high energy, when to talk, when to shut the fuck up, when to be real, when to be in character. And I might add, to me she looks like she doesn't even know where to begin to search for balance, or that there are techniques that will help you to find balance. I don't even think she suspects that those techniques exist in the first place. And, you know, being unable to find balance is one of the most common problem to anyone. It happens in many different contexts and, you know, make people insecure because of it. And when people are insecure, they tend to conform, they tend to hide behind the character. And I think we can all agree that the Jen that we are seeing on television is clearly a character. I don't really see Jen. When I look at Jen, what I think is La Ganja Season 6. That's what I think. The moment in which she's really there looks like they are almost non-existent. The problem is that the character is not a mask to hide the monster behind it. It's a shell to protect the insecure person who is using it. That's where the narrative splits apart and changes the meaning of the things that you see. Because we are looking at a person who is cut out from the world, who is buying all the narrative she's been fed, who is clearly uncomfortable, who is clearly hiding behind the character because maybe doesn't necessarily have the maturity to be herself. She's just not yet at that point, and all of that, it's being exploited, effectively exploited, to build a narrative in here. Finding balance in life, and I'm not just talking to Jen, I'm talking in general, it's, I think, a very challenging problem. There is nothing to be ashamed of, because it's very, very easy to take extreme positions. And this is what we see in our everyday lives. No matter the topic, you always find a ton of people, especially online, taking extreme position. The real challenge in here is taking both positions into consideration and find the recipe that balances those two extremes in a way that works for you. And finding that balance is really the golden road to learn to find yourself and express your true potential as a person. So what Jen has to do, in my opinion, is growing up. And there is nothing wrong with it. Do things at your own pace, but this is catastrophic. And it's only going to get worse. So instead of saying anything remotely similar to all of the things that I said in the past 5 minutes, RuPaul instead says, we are in show business, we are self-centered, and we're all like that. We just can't appear to be like that. And then she has a nice laugh. This is the moment in which my partner actually walked off. Says, this is abuse. I'm not watching this. This is abuse. Too bad he didn't read the contract. So if you've been paying attention in the chat, I am asking you, I'm giving you a challenge. Don't you see anything strange in RuPaul's response? Because she is doing something. But what exactly is she doing? Because I want you to think. Okay, this is not just a show. I want you to think. What's happening in here? What is she really doing? Nightmare Troubadour, she's dismissing Jen. There we go. Nightmare Troubadour, she is dismissing Jen's feeling and changing the narrative. You hit the fucking nail on the fucking head. Jen is saying, I have a problem in finding balance. Instead of validating what she is saying and acknowledging her feeling, RuPaul is denying them and replacing them with a narrative of being self-centered. This is what is happening in here. I completely understand when people say they signed the contract, they knew what they were getting into. I agree. I mean, you signed the contract and you're on board with everything. I get it. But as a society, can we fucking accept the existence of contracts like these? Because this is not a problem of RuPaul's Drag Race. This is a problem of reality television, in general. Now, to Pandora, they say they like the dress. It really is a clash of patterns. I completely agree. I might be old-fashioned, but to me, Pandora was the best clash of patterns on that runway. Now, for the challenge. They say that they liked hearing about her being vulnerable, that her topic was an important topic, and that it is important to let the mask down and talk about how you feel about things. So apparently Pandora didn't open up enough. And Michelle continues that she knows that Pandora is not a quiet queen, and that Pandora is holding back. So Pandora, you should have heard more. You should have let us exploit you better. And you know what? Pandora is playing the game in her own way. She's doing good. I have no doubt that she will benefit from this. Her edit is nothing to gag on, but it has great potential. So good for Pandora. At the end of the Cryptiques, Raja and Pandora are safe. Kylie, Scarlet and Jen are in the bottom. Let's move on to Untucked. Now, I would like to spend half an hour talking about this Untucked. Unfortunately, we have so much in this review that I have to go really quickly. So, suffice it to say that Eureka explains that Scarlet was a little bit too much in character, she was not very real, and that Jen was very strategic in the way she was talking, like she does normally. Now, I think that the word strategic is a very poor choice of words in here, because in the context of this episode, it takes a whole new meaning. I think what Eureka was trying to say is that Jen has a persona and she brought that persona on the show like she brings that persona normally during filming. Now, for me, this Untucked was really heartwarming because the queens open up in a way that feels really real. It feels heartfelt. This is not some kind of yada yada sisterhood bullshit that I always talk about. This feels real to me. Really, this is one of the few honest moments on the show that I saw in a long time, and it's a pity that I don't have time to actually discuss it. Suffice it to say that I'm very impressed with Eureka. I started this season saying, oh, Eureka is not very bright. Eureka has the heart on the right place, but she always says a ton of stupid bullshit. And in all this 30 minutes, she's completely proving me wrong, and I'm extremely happy about it, because Eureka did her growing up, and it finally shows. So great job, Eureka. Another important thing that happens in this Untucked is that Eureka says there's room only for one big girl in the top. And this is extremely important because it's telling us that the queens know about the representation spots in the top 4. Remember the things that we always talk about in the speculation. This is Viacom CBS. This is, mainstream. Of course, there are representation spots in there. So we always have a spot for the Queen of Color, not portrayed as a villain, the big girl. And they know it. And this is part of playing the game for them. Incredibly, Eureka finds the best way to address the situation. When I say I was really impressed, I was really impressed. Props to this big girl. This episode will make you fall in love with Eureka. And once you do, she will be weaponized and teleported to support Jen's villain edit. Now, let's move back to the workroom because we have to put the final nail in the coffin of Jen's villain edit. We are back in here, all of the queens are in here, and Scarlet is telling us about her critiques. That they love the look, that her group had the most difficult category, and that she didn't have the worst critique out of all of them, which is right. Scarlet, we read the Cryptiques before, Scarlet didn't have the worst Cryptiques. Jen had the worst Cryptiques out of everyone, but we don't really have time to process that, because immediately Jen is of course bitch-facing to Scarlet while she is speaking, and we're intercepted by a confessional from Jen. And this Jen is pimple on the nose Jen, the confessional that most likely comes from the future, telling us that it seems that Scarlet is in some way ignoring the fact that RuPaul literally said that she made her feel uncomfortable. And this, to me, is one of the best Franken sentences ever made in the show. The transition is incredible. The name Scarlet in there was added in post-production. Now, I cannot say this with 100% certainty, but I heard a gap in there. Even though it's really, really smooth, I think I heard a gap in there. Now, I cannot confirm this, of course, 100%. We don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, but if I'm wrong on this, you can count that I will correct myself when the next episode comes out. For now, suffice it to say that we have Jen coming seemingly from the future to shit on Scarlet. So, in this moment, the show is pitting these two queens against each other, making Jen effectively look like a bully.
They said that we had the most difficult category, but I definitely didn't get the worst critiques.
This is not the tea. It seems like Scarlet is in some way ignoring the fact that RuPaul, the person whose name is on the top billing of this program, literally said that Scarlet made her uncomfortable.
So we move on to the sofa, where Scarlet says, well, I didn't have the harshest critiques. And then Ginger asks, who do you think should go home? And Scarlet answers, well, Jen had the harshest critiques. Now, Ginger is not stupid, is she? She knows exactly how to play this game. She knows exactly which kind of game is being played right there. And she played it fantastically. Remember when I told you Ginger is a consumed professional? This is partially what I meant with that. At this point, we move back to the group, and Jen is upset because she's saying, well, they told me to bring the funk, which was a Cryptique from episode 3. And I brought it. This is me. So this is a compliment. And to me, Jen looks completely disoriented. She's still anchored to the Cryptiques from the judges that came from episode 3. You know, the one that eventually brought her a win in episode 4. But to me, she looks like she doesn't really understand what's happening in here. Eureka intercepts the conversation saying, well, yes, bring the funk, but not when the challenge is meant to be a conversation. Trinity confirms by saying that her level of energy was too high. And all of these critiques, I completely agree with them. But Jen doesn't. That's the point. Jen doesn't. She says, well, I was not there 100%. At this point, you have to put yourself in Jen's perspective. What Jen considers high energy for us is way too high energy. What she considers normal for us is better, but still high energy. So at this point, Jen is really frustrated, and it's time for a mismatched confessional by Eureka. On the left, you see punk rock hair Eureka in a confessional that was likely skipped, saying, Jen is wearing me the fuck out. Followed by pimple cheek Eureka saying, well, the funk Jen is missing is the honesty.
I was not up here 100% of the time. Like, I just don't...
Jen is wearing me the fuck out. She doesn't really understand that the judges just want her to be real. That's the funk she's missing, is the honesty.
And now you understand why it was so important to pinpoint where Pimple Cheek Eureka is coming from. Because emphasis here is on the word honesty. In a moment, Jen is going to cry on cue, and we are a second away from Jen viciously attacking Scarlet again. So the fact that you have Eureka there, teleported from episode 4, telling us that Jen is dishonest, it's going to be proven in facts in the next 5 minutes. At this point, Eureka and others, including Pandora, try to explain the situation a little bit more by saying, listen, Jen, just try to be real. Just try to be authentic. What they are not saying is, if you're going to play a character, Jen, stick with it and don't question it, or else you'll be asking for trouble by filming for Drag Race. But of course, they cannot say that. Their career is on the line too. And if someone has to be the villain, well, it's better that it's somebody else than you. They are not Candy Muse. Do you remember Candy Muse? When she went live on Roscoe saying, oh yes, I played a character on Drag Race. A ton of other girls played a character on Drag Race. You know, that is basically what you do on Drag Race. But Candy Muse admitted to it. These queens right now cannot admit it. Maybe some of them will once they get out of Drag Race, but I doubt that. You can criticize Candy Muse for everything that you want, but she will be telling you what she thinks. And this is something that I really appreciate about her. So at this point, Jen is completely losing it. Jen is crying. And she is crying in a confessional where we see pimple on the lip Jen with razor burn on the neck. This is the confessional that we don't know yet where it's coming from. My best bet is that it comes from episode 4, day 1. But I cannot yet be sure of it.
I just don't know what anybody wants from me at this point. I'm a big cheerleader at heart. And so for people to say that it's insincere and it's not real is crushing to me. Because that is me. And I'm frustrated. I'm really trying.
Why is she crying? Well, because in a moment she's going to be viciously attacking Scarlet, confirming Eureka's confessional, saying that Jen is not honest. So we move on to the sofa to have a talk with Ginger Minge. Ginger brings up the question, who got the worst critiques? Because Scarlet said that she had the best and you had the worst. Which is true, that's exactly what we saw. But we don't have really time to process that, because we're immediately hit by a confessional of Jen, telling us that this is bullshit. And who is this? This is Pimple on the Nose Jen. The Jen that is coming, seemingly, from the future, 1 or 2 episodes away, if not even refilmed at the end of the season. So, the moment Jen says bullshit on a confessional, everyone is effectively convinced that she was being disingenuous while crying on screen.
So when I spoke to Scarlet, she said she had the best critiques and you had the harshest.
Oh, bitch. This is truly some bullshit.
At this point, we are back on the sofa where Jen explains, I got the harshest critiques from everybody else. Rue gave her harshest critique to Scarlet. This is what she's saying. She's validating what Scarlet is saying and adding that when it comes to RuPaul, Scarlet was the one who had the worst. She is not denying what Scarlet is saying. She's just adding more details to the truth that Scarlet already brought on. But we, the viewers, we don't have time to process that. Because immediately we are hit by Pimple on the Nose Jen again, telling us that she finds it really annoying that Scarlet, and the word Scarlet has been replaced. I will play the audio for you. And then she comes on camera saying, trying to pin this narrative on me.
I'll be honest, I got probably the harsher critiques from everybody else, but Rue gave Scarlet the harshest critiques, like for anybody. And I was like, that's from Mother. I find it really annoying that Scarlet's trying to pin this narrative on me. Because that's not the real narrative. That's not the true tea.
This deliberation was the final nail in the coffin of Jen's edit. And they told us a very, very effective story in this episode. That Jen plotted against Akuria. That she got caught red-handed trying to hide playing dirty. That she hides her true ugly self behind a character. That Jen was fake crying to get herself out of trouble, only to immediately be ready to viciously throw Scarlet under the bus. So, it's time to go back to the main stage, and we find out that Bianca Del Rio is going to be the Lipsync assassin for this episode, which, honestly, I don't know how many people bought it. I thought this is impossible, but if it is happening, it's going to be iconic for some reason. Of course, it doesn't really happen, because the real lip sync is going to be between Ginger Minj and Mayan Miller. I didn't really like the song for this lip sync. It was not gay enough for me, but that's my personal taste. Ginger camped up the shit out of that song. Ginger did an incredible job, and I was leaving for Mayhem taking off her shoe. Anyway, Ginger wins, which is very, very deserved. She kind of reminded me of Bandilacram versus Aja in All Stars 3. And Scarlet is eliminated and goes home. At this point, we are moving on to the confessional charts and the speculation for this episode. If you don't want any possible spoiler, this is the moment you should leave the review. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. This is the confessional chart from this episode. As we can see, Scarlet went home. She had a very good amount of time in this episode. Strangely, she didn't have any kind of mirror moments or humanizing moments, which are usually typical for queens that go home. Could have been better, could have also been worse. She could have been portrayed completely like a villain. Instead, she only had that minor moment with Kylie in the beginning of the episode. Ginger is the winner of the episode. She has the most amount of confessionals out of everyone. We saw this happen already in All Stars. That's how they decided to edit confessionals from this season. You win the episode, you get the most amount of time in the confessionals. Followed by Jen. She has as much positive confessionals as negative ones. Jen is fully entering villain territory in this episode. Surprisingly, Akira has a couple of negative confessionals. I am not sure if we should pin them on Akira because they were mostly related to Jen, but to me it looks like they were trying to make Akira look a little bit shady. So I put those negative confessionals in there. Raja has a good amount of time as well. This was a very good episode for Raja because even though she was not prominently shown in the episode, she got her chance to shine without taking away from anybody else, like Ginger, for example. So this was another very good episode for Raja. And everybody else kept fading in the background. Pandora, Eureka, Kylie, and Trinity, we don't have many moments to directly connect with them through confessionals. But if we did, we would have found out that Eureka, Kylie, and Trinity were time traveling as much as Jen this episode. I didn't show you because it was not relevant, but I noticed, and the moment it will become relevant, I will bring it back to your attention. Now, in order to move to the speculations, I made a cumulative chart from episode 1 to 5 so that we can actually see how much time each queens were given during the confessionals. In first position, we have Trinity K with almost 5 minutes of confessionals, followed by Raja with a good 4 minutes. Next to her is Jen, and then everybody else less and less confessional overall time. Now, we said in the previous speculations that for me, the top 4 is going to be Trinity, Raja, Ginger, and possibly Kylie. I still believe that they are going to have a representation spot for Kylie. Maybe Pandora still has a shot to the top 4. I don't think instead of Raja, if anybody is going to get out of there, it's probably going to be Trinity. Because Raja's edit is just not comparable with Trinity. She had an incredible redemption storyline. So if someone has to get out of what I think is the top 4, it's definitely going to be Trinity. To make space for Pandora. Kylie and Pandora, to me, are our own silent assassin. But they need to come the fuck out. Otherwise, nobody will buy that narrative. It should have happened already this episode. It's not happened. If it doesn't happen next episode, I cannot believe it. But Kylie might not be in the top 4. It's unbelievable to me, but it might really be happening. It's one of the most stupid decisions, well, stupid from a marketing perspective, that I've seen happening on the show lately. In a way, I would be happy about it because you need to show me the talent. I see that you are beautiful, I see that you have the motivation, I see that you have the strength to go all the way through, but I need to see you shine, because if I don't, I will start thinking that you don't deserve that spot. So I really hope that Kylie and Pandora will wake the fuck up next episode. Jen is in complete villain territory. Since Pimple on the Nose Jen was coming to us from the future, I think it's very reasonable that she will at least stay with us for a couple more episodes, which means they were successful in triggering her. And remember what I told you since the very beginning. If she is going to embrace this villain narrative, she will last longer. Possibly even to the top 4. So by this point, the only thing that I can tell you is that I still believe in representation spots in the top 4, but at the moment I will degrade it to probably a top 3, with Raja, Ginger and Kylie, with Kylie starting to be uncertain. Which means by this episode I have no idea what the fuck is going on anymore. So we are going to see about that. Now, Eureka. You know that there is one representation spot in there for a big girl. And that big girl, in my opinion, is Ginger, because she has proved once again that she can get the job done, no matter the job, if you know what I mean. Eureka had a fantastic edit this episode, but I don't think that this alone will grant her a spot to the top 4, for one simple reason. Ginger is used to go to places where you need to go in order to get the job done. Eureka, maybe not yet. So I don't think that Eureka has any chance to get to the top 4 over Ginger. I don't think there's any way she will get there. But with that said, she's having a fantastic edit on the show. So good for her, because she's coming out as a fully mature person who really learned from the ton of shit that she said and done over the years, and she learned from her mistakes, which is a great human example for me. I am very happy of what I'm seeing from Eureka from the show, but I don't think she has any chance against Ginger, because even though Eureka had a great episode, Ginger is still the one who won. And you know that Eureka was in the best group, so it would have been completely justified if she won. But they passed on the opportunity to give a win to Ginger. And I think this is what's going to make the difference between the two of them. The only people without any kind of negative confessionals whatsoever are Raja, Ginger, Eureka, Kylie and Pandora. Does it have a meaning? I don't know yet, because by this point I'm so disoriented by everything that happened in this episode that I'm starting to really question everything. So I'm sorry if these speculations and these charts were not as useful or interesting as usual, but I am completely burned out by this episode. So maybe next week things will start getting better, but watch out for Jen's edit. And we made it! We finally reached the end of this review. This was incredible to make. It took a ton of work and basically all of my sanity, but I hope we got most of the things right. There's only one way to find out, which is watching the new episode of RuPaul's Drag Race. Meanwhile, thank you so much for our patrons for supporting the channel, and especially to the new people who just joined this month: Emma Wakely, Andy, Franny Fishsticks, Stacy Hose and Louisa. Thank you so much. As usual, have a great week, and I will see you back on Sunday for the live streams. Thank you so much for watching.